Cool.
So I'm good to go whenever.
Oh, I saw it. Yeah. So I saw you actually posted like saying, is there anything you want us to talk about? Did you get some people reply to that?
I did.
Okay.
Some people said, some of them were, one of the things that I thought would be interesting to talk about in that I have not done this thing that they were asking about was, how did you come out to your family, as deconstructing or as atheist or whatever? Because I kind of lean atheist now. I try not to push that too heavily on my account because I think it could isolate some people and I want everybody to feel welcome. And it's just a big, scary word if you're raised in a high control religion. Like it's just the dirtiest word you could possibly say to anyone, Yeah. But some people, they just were like, well, how did you, come out to your family and tell them about all this? And I'm like, I'm not telling anyone, I mean, that's
a good thing to talk about anyway, the fact that you don't necessarily have to and stuff. So we can definitely go.
That's what I was thinking. So, sure. Somebody said, just maybe mentioning the number of responses that I get when I ask questions about traumatic experiences and the crazy racist, homophobic things that they say from the pulpit. I mean, some of these churches that you would just think are, you look out on the outside and think, it's probably a pretty
regular, normal church. Yeah. And it turns out maybe actually, yes, it is a regular, normal church. Maybe we just need to redefine what regular, normal churches are. Right. Cool. That's interesting. Okay, cool. I'll maybe even keep that in. So like if people are listening, they already have a taster of what's coming, but whatever. Yeah. Cool. We can go through anything else that comes up, but cool. Yeah. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit to people? I know that you're kind of trying to keep this covert kind of, edge to you because you have this public platform and a lot of your family aren't aware of what's going on and other people. Yeah. But can you give us like a rough overview? I obviously, the more detail you give, the more people like the detectives out there will start working at. I'm sure no one's sitting there with a notepad and pen. But
you never know.
Do you want to give a rough overview of who are you, like, and why are you doing this account? Like what's led you from where you were to here?
That's a great question. Do I know the answer? I guess I'll just start with a little bit of my background. I'm from a very small town in South Louisiana, outside of a bigger town. I probably am going to out myself in that way because I do think at some point I'd like to mention the name of the church that I came from. And I don't think they deserve to have the secrecy that a lot of people have given them because they're very powerful, but they don't have power really over me anymore. Because I'm out of the city, my family is all out of the church. Some people don't have that privilege, and I recognize that. Some people, they just have to say, yeah, and go along with everything because they could, I mean, I've heard stories of people who, their spouse or they're a staff member at the church.
Yeah.
Or they rent a house from someone who, attends a church they can't, I mean, quite literally, just can't say anything. It's pretty crazy. Yeah. But anyway, so it was a mega church in the time that mega churches were not really a thing. So even in the late 80s, early 90s, we had thousands of people in the congregation, which was a little bit unusual for that era. I think that's more come into popularity now, but it was very, purity culture was a huge part of it. I don't even know how to describe it. It was just such an insane experience because, you're in it when you're in it, you can't really see all those crazy levels. Just a really high control environment. So it was cultish in the way, like there are things that it kind of ticks a lot of the boxes of a cult. There were, and some people that I knew who went to other churches that like believed similar things didn't have these hallmarks of a cult like my church did. So it was very, you were absolutely in or out. There was no gray area. If someone left, it was your assumption and everyone's assumption that they were going to hell, basically, to put it very frankly. And then of course, every other denomination, anybody who was conservative, I guess mainline, is that the word? Mainline Protestant?
Yeah. Were they much more evangelical then?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I should have mentioned that. Yeah, it was very charismatic church. lots of, loud music and and baptism was really important. It actually had Baptist roots. And then it sort of moved into non-denominational. But the thing that was sort of, I mean, I don't know that you can ever have a really good institution if one family runs it with no accountability. And that was the situation there. But yeah, so I came from a really high control church. My dad was, and this is the part I have to be a little bit careful about. My dad was a political pundit, conservative political pundit. He commented on everything. He was published in newspapers. He had a radio show, like very conservative radio show on a Christian radio network that lots of people knew him. He was a lawyer. And so he would do like pro bono work for, Operation Rescue, which was a anti-abortion activist, if you want to call it that group, in the 90s. They would stage like sit-ins and all of this kind of stuff. My sister was actually arrested when she was like 18 for protesting at an abortion clinic. Our views, both of us have completely changed on that by now, but the pro-life movement was the big thing at that time. So that was, the church was really wrapped up in that. And we were too. I mean, I just have pictures of my brothers and I holding signs for, like anti-abortion signs and stuff. And so they were from a very young age involved in that. My dad ran for office in my state and, all on these conservative. So you can, I'm just trying to paint a picture like it was, there was no other.
You were in deep.
Oh, really deep. Yeah. Yeah. So, and then I got out of that when I was a teenager, late age teenager. My dad had sort of stopped attending church at that point. Little did I know that he was living like a whole sort of other life, which I guess is kind of a classic story. Like, he was like, he was an alcoholic and we didn't know. And he was like, he was doing less than honorable things and all this kind of stuff. And so he stopped attending church and I kind of bounced around a few different places. I ended up going to a Christian university for a year. And that was in Tennessee. It's called Lee University. And it's a Christian, it is a university. It's not just like a little, Bible college kind of thing, but it was also very high control. You had to go to chapel, you couldn't, all that kind of stuff. And then, it was crazy. And then, after that, just kind of moved back home. Anyway, I ended up in the city where I am now. I live in Texas and I went to a church here for a while, and I'm probably going on about this too long, but basically, I had a long withdrawal from Christianity. It was not it was very slow. I was in the church for years, even after I saw all the problems with the institution itself. But I've been out of church for about 12 years. And a lot of people don't know that. So it's been quite a while that I haven't been in church, but that whole time I was an evangelical Christian. I still believed all the same things. I still voted like them most of the time. I had kind of gotten more centrist, in the past 5 years or so, but, and that's kind of why it bothers me when people say, oh, you just got hurt by the church. And it's like, well, no, I was hurt by the church and I left the church because I didn't like it. And I still believed everything.
Right. Yeah.
But it was this spring. So like June of 2021, it just all started to boom. Like I had been having some doubts for a couple of years before that. And then this year it was, I can name the day. I mean, like it was just, there was a day where I was like, and I was just like in tears, like, I don't believe any of this anymore. Like it all just.
Was there a particular catalyst? Was there a particular thing that sparked it all?
There was. And it's sort of an odd thing because it wasn't something that had affected me directly, but this church that had abused, had been in the institution. One of my siblings had been abused sexually. And my other sibling, my sister, had been abused, I would say psychologically. I can tell that story if you want, but it was a really horrible circumstance. And that was in the 90s. Years later, 2021, this article comes out about the church. They have had, there's this big lawsuit that there's been a lot of abuse in this one program that they had. It was the kind of church where they would have lots of different, ministries and outreaches and all those kind of things. So this was actually like a youth mentoring program. And they had been just abusing children. I mean, not children, of course they were underage, they were teenagers.
Sure.
I would say that's children. But they had, some of it was racist abuse, using derogatory, and slurs at people who they were supposed to be mentoring, pitting people against each other. There's reports that they had fight nights where they would make these kids fight each other. And this family, that checks out with what I knew of them, the family that runs the church. And for some reason, when I read that article, that was it. I don't know why. It was just, for some reason, it just told me, this is what this is, and for some reason, it sort of, all the slots kind of fit together. Like, this is not necessarily an isolated thing. And I think that Christianity in general might be a little bit abusive. And I know that's a really, really unpopular opinion with a lot of people, but it was weird how it all sort of, okay, maybe God is abusive, maybe the God of the Bible is abusive. Maybe the idea of hell is abusive, or even not hell, even if you don't believe in hell and you believe that, people are going to be separated eternally from their families and from God, who they have the choice to, anyway, I'm not going to go too far into that right now, but it's just like, for some reason that was it. Yeah. And it was that same day, I was just like, I called my sister and I was like, I just don't believe any of this. Like, I don't know what to believe. I don't, and it just kind of unraveled from there. So
it's amazing, isn't it? These moments where everything changes on a dime. And it's terrifying. And even like you throw away a statement like, oh, they had fight nights, and that adds up of what I knew about the leaders of the church. And I'm like, there's a moment where you're like, if you read about a church holding fight nights and you go, yeah, that makes sense. That's not okay, right? There's been some stuff here just sitting in the background of like, oh, you knew some shit was going on. Like, or you knew that these people were not good people. Like, for you to go, yeah, I'm really upset about that, but that makes sense. Like, I often say to my people that talk to me, you get so many, such a broad spectrum of craziness of people's experiences, the stories, the hurt, the pain they've been through. And I'm always sitting there going, I'm so shocked every time at just how awful the experience people have had at the hands of people that said they were loving and gracious and kind and merciful. And yet every fucking time I'm not shocked at all. Like, there's this double component where I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you went through that. And also at the same time, like, but actually I have zero reason to doubt that you went through that. And I know, of course, you went through that. Like, absolutely, it's this weird thing in me that still feels this like recoil from it. Like, just like, oh, whoa, that's horrible. That's horrifying. I'm so sorry. But yeah, you're not alone. Like, it's just so heartbreaking. And, you've had these terrible experiences. Your family have had these terrible experiences. Yeah. And it's such a trope that it's like, oh, you had a bad experience and that's why you left. It's like, no, we've been through some shit and we doubled down on this. We believed, we were here for it. We were in, we had faith. Yeah. It's such a frustrating thing to hear, people going, oh, you just, you never really believed, or you were just hurt or whatever. And it's like, let me tell you, I never believed. That's
the one, when people say that, it's just like, you can't really go anywhere from there. You're like, okay, that's what you want. Exactly. You don't want to believe you could ever be me. Fine.
My go-to is just replying, okay. And that is it. Just like,
okay. Sure. I usually say, okay, buddy, because it makes people angry, but I mean, that is such a good point. The fight nights, and of course that is a shocking thing in itself. It's a shocking phrase.
That's the first one. I've been doing this a long time and I've talked to thousands of people and I don't think I've come across fight nights yet. That's a unique one for me.
People will be able to Google that one. That will not be, it will be,
it can't be that common, right?
No, I hope not. You never know.
Again, right? But on some level, I won't be too surprised. God damn it.
No, but I mean, and one of the reasons I said that was just because, and I'm really getting into some stuff that this is a little uncomfortable to talk about, because I do worry about, these people are really, really powerful in my hometown, really powerful. But they were bullies, this, and everybody has this sort of view of the pastor's kid that they're, oh yeah, they can be a certain way, or they can be, sometimes I feel like I've heard they're either golden, the golden child, or they can be just like a holy terror, pardon the pun. But they were bullies. These people were bullies, and kids, I'm not gonna hold that against them. If you're a kid and you're in who knows what your home life was like. And I know that they were getting, you could call it whoopings, like that's what they would call it there. Like your parents would whoop you or whatever. That's not really what we called it, but in my hometown, that would be the proper term. And, they were crazy controlled by their parents, but they grew up to be, once you're an adult, you're an adult. And I just was not really surprised that they would feel the entitlement to manipulate people in that way, and to make it seem like, because all of this, remember, is under the guise of mentorship.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I can just let that lie. Like all of that I mentioned, and the slurs and the division, pitting kids against each other, was under like, oh, well, I'm sure I can think of 8 different ways they would say it, that, oh, well, Christ was persecuted, or, oh, you've been, well, this is what it's going to feel like when you're separated from, or if you're out in the world, you're supposed to be different, or it's a battle, or, all those things. I can just hear it, all the crazy things that they would say. But yeah, I mean, and so one of my siblings, I'm going to try to be as careful as I can explaining this. One of my siblings was sexually abused, and the head pastor, who is the father of these people who were staging the fight nights, and who led this program, who were too young really they shouldn't have had that kind of power.
Right.
Anyway, that's an aside.
The power to hold fight nights definitely is reserved for 40 plus, I would say,
Totally. I mean, there's definitely an age.
There's somewhere, there's a line. I don't know if I've got a line anywhere on my spectrum of age, but someone somewhere is drawing a line.
We'll ask Chuck Palahniuk. But whenever that came out, and my parents approached the head pastor, who I think I mentioned just had no accountability. I mean, they may have had a board, but they were all totally beholden to him, and their whole lives, depended on like him having favor, or them having favor with him. And so his solution was he I guess maybe was following something that he believed was biblical, where if you have a problem with someone, you go to them and like discuss it and you fix it. I don't remember the hierarchy because I've been out of church too long, but it's like the first thing is you go to the person. The second thing is you go to the person with a leader or a friend or whatever. Well, the pastor's solution to my sibling being sexually abused was to sit them and their abuser down in a room and just have them discuss what they're, to forgive, for my sibling to forgive the abuser. That had to be on the table. To just discuss it, and, how they were, I'm guessing maybe there was a little bit of a reprimand, like, going forward, or I don't even know, but this person was in children's ministry and stayed there for years. He stayed there for years.
Just the worst.
Yeah. And so, my mother, who has passed away now, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, approached my sibling and was like, I handled that wrong. I mean, but I'm talking 20 plus years after it happened.
Yeah.
I handled that wrong, and I would like to pursue legal action if we can. And the statute of limitations, had passed. And, but it's just, you just go, what was your mental state within this institution that you felt like that was the okay thing to do for your child? Some people don't know that it's going on with their children,
Sure.
And that's one thing. But to know, and then But he was there. The pastor was their leader, and he was the person you went to for everything. I want to buy a house. I want to change my job. I want to go to this university. And you would go to the pastor and,
run it
get
by
his
him,
approval or totally. So,
yeah.
It
just, it shows the level of, there's this component within church of this creating a distrust of the world, creating a distrust of worldly systems, creating this concept that we, the church, provide everything. We, the church, can fix everything, because God is, he fixes everything. It's always, you run it through God. And I get it. If you have a system of faith that gives you peace and helps you, find peace with yourself, with the world and all that. For sure. You go through something painful, pray, connect with God, connect with the divine. Absolutely. I'm not taking that away. But when people start finding their connection to the divine and the way that they receive instruction from the divine through a third party that is this powerful person or his intermediaries, we do go, oh, this terrible thing happens where any person in today's day and age that isn't brought up in a religion would immediately be like, okay, well, first things first, we go to the cops. We start gathering evidence. We start putting together a case. We make sure there's therapy for this person, this child, all these.
And immediately get them away from the person. Right?
And of course,
get them away from the person.
Absolutely. We need to talk to that person, but they don't need to talk to that person. That is not a good system. But when you're in these controlling environments, you do think, okay, well, we need to talk to the pastor about this because the pastor will fix it. The pastor will make it right. The pastor will, like God,
he's the father,
lay hands on it and make it all pure as snow again. And the pastor does these weird things with these weird biblical instructions, and, I don't know, passage in Jesus in Matthew where he's like, hey, look, if someone's done something wrong to you, before you go and worship God, maybe go make it right with them, or, and talk to them first. And then if they don't deal with their shit, go talk to the elders. It's like, Jesus probably wasn't saying, hey, if someone abused you, you have to go and sit in a quiet room on your own with them and make it right. No, Jesus probably wouldn't have said that. I mean, maybe he would. I don't know. We were talking 2,000 years ago as well. So
but that's where you can't use common sense doesn't come into play.
No.
And it's the same reason why, someone recently said to me that Christianity was a Paul cult. And that the scales fell off my eyes when they said that. I was like, oh my gosh, they base everything off of these few verses, which, Paul's section of the Bible is not huge. It's not a lot,
not his authentic section, no.
Right. that is a fair point. But just all I'm saying is just taking those little bits. I mean, and that was something that bothered me when I was very young. And I wish I could say that I was skeptical about more from the get-go, but I wasn't.
But you can't be skeptical about more, right? As a kid growing up in these environments, were you in public school or were you in a Christian school?
No, I was homeschooled.
You're so even more, right? Where are you getting exposed to, where are teachers going, oh, today, once a year, we're going to pull the class aside and for an hour talk about what to look out for, red flags and relating to adults and who to talk to if you feel uncomfortable. And, that's a normal part in public schools, maybe not in Louisiana 20 plus years ago, but in fact, maybe not in Louisiana right now. I don't know. I was in Louisiana a couple of years ago talking to some kids about the schooling system, and I was like, "Holy shit!" I'm from Europe, but
the Louisiana school system is terrible.
So maybe not, but I think on the whole today, kids are brought up with, hey, this is these are some things that aren't okay, and these are some things to keep an eye out for, and hey, these are some safe people or places to talk to. Those are kind of things that are discussed. But when you grow up in Sesame
Street,
right, exactly. Well, that's it. Child psychologists are going, hey, some kids are growing up without that, so let's get it in Sesame Street. Let's get it in on Nickelodeon, on a Cartoon Network or whatever. But
you can't do that now because
you can't do that
raising your children.
Right? Yeah, but you can't. Yeah, well, it's the deep state right there. But you can't do that with homeschooled. You can't do it when you're brought up in a church and every night you're in church. You have no friends outside of Christianity, no friends outside of this brand of Christianity. And we hold ourselves to such a high standard and beat the shit out of ourselves, right? Looking back, we're like, oh, I should have done differently. I should have done this. It's like, what other option did you actually have on the table at that point? You knew nothing. You were some kid that
no exposure. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. And even if you did have the exposure, how could you possibly go against your entire family, all your friends? And that's the thing that really I started to realize later was not super normal, was my church was my whole life. And I knew a few people who they were like, well, yeah, we go to church on Sunday, and, or my Catholic friends. And they're like, yeah, my mom makes me go to mass so that she'll fill up my car with gas. Like that was, right. It's just a thing that you do to kind of tick off the boxes. But at that church, no way, and a lot, I'm not alone in that at all, but it was just a very eye-opening experience to go, oh, you can separate the rest of your life from church or from Christianity. Yeah. I had a narcissistic mother. She had narcissistic personality disorder. And so I was like her person that she told all the spiritual things to. And she had some really crazy ideas about God and just spiritual things. I don't even really know where to begin with that, but I was sort of her sounding board for that, even from a really young age.
Right. So
you add that element into it, and it's just like, I had no chance to think for myself at all, and again, even if I had, you're looking at this chance to think for yourself and going, oh, that's the path to hell. And if I leave this, I'm going to be really unhappy. My life is going to fall apart.
Yeah.
I won't have favor with God, whatever that means. I've never had it anyway, but so.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about how hard it is for most of us as adults to be separating ourselves and peeling ourselves away from these ingrained ways of thinking, fearing hell, fearing judgment, fearing being wrong, somehow having a hedge of protection removed and crashing your car, whatever.
That phrase triggers me.
Hedge of protection, man. What a shitty way to protect. Even back then, I'm sure there was better ways to protect than having a hedge. Like that's a low tier offering.
Good. Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you had you're buying insurance from God and you're like, okay, so what are you offering? He's like, I got a hedge for you. And it's like, Molech over here is offering a stone wall. Come on, what do you got? Like, it's like, nope, hedge of protection is the best I can do.
I wish that we don't have hedges really here. Like most people build fences, but I know that in the UK, a hedge is like a thick layer of, like a bush or brush that you use as a border.
You'll get scratched up good if you go through it. But you'll come out the other side and kill you. You know what I mean? It's just not that great. I mean, even a fence. No. I mean, it's a slight improvement, but you can climb a fence. I mean,
but you're an all powerful God, and that's what you're offering.
That's what you got.
A hedge, a fence.
I got a hedge for you.
All right. Yeah.
So funny. But we do, even as adults, people are processing this. I mean, they've been indoctrinated with these ideas for decades. They've been told, if you step out of line, God will remove that protection. If you step out of line, you will end up in hell. If you step out of line, what will happen to your kids' faith?
It's terrifying.
All these different knock-on things, and we're scared. Yeah. And not only that, there is the thing of I rent my house from Steve in church, and if he's told to cut off ties with me, or he just suddenly realizes, well, I don't want a non-Christian renting my house. I want a Christian rent my house because I don't want that spiritual atmosphere in my house, or these kind of things that genuinely that's we all believed on some level, and with every goodness in our heart, we were like, oh no, we want the Holy Spirit residing in my home or whatever. Or what about, I rent from Steve, but actually I also work for Bob over there at his car dealership, and if I am no longer a Christian, is Bob going to want a non-Christian helping him sell cars? Probably not. I'd probably want to lose, and so people get and these are amazing benefits of being a part of a community. And actually you join the golf club and you make friends and stuff, and you can rely on some of these ties to really help you get by, and it's a support network, and that's how could work. So it's not inherently evil that people in the church help each other. I don't think there's an evil component there necessarily. I just think that systemically it can really become this huge leveraging component that keeps us within, or at least keeps our mouth shut or whatever. It's terrifying, especially when you're in these environments like you're describing. I don't know the church. I'm not that up on churches very well anyway. I don't do the gold celebrity church culture. I can throw a few names around as a joke, but that's about it. But what you're describing, it makes me think of, did you listen to the Gangster Capitalism podcast on Liberty University? No. Oh my God, it's such a good podcast. triggering, but good. Because they do podcasts on capitalists, on basically these extreme systems of capitalism that have gone way too far and gone wrong. And they did their third season on Liberty U, which is nuts, right? They're a capitalism podcast. And like, let's look at this church and this whole system and this university. And but
should be obvious to all of us.
These insanely powerful people that actually, on some level, you go, gosh, how hard would it have been to be the kid that grew up in that? But on another level, you go, and because it was hard for you as that kid, you actually are now in power, and you're actually even worse. Like there's some level of like, you didn't even grow up knowing different. You just know power. You just know entitlement. You just know that snap and it gets done, and everyone drops everything for you. Like, it's scary, those environments. And it's scary for us as adults to speak out against that, right? Even at the beginning, you're like, I want to be careful because these people are powerful people. You're
they are.
Right? Yeah. How much more 20 years ago, 30 years ago, were you like, definitely not opening my mouth?
Oh.
Right?
Oh. No, I mean,
you like a bug.
I remember, and this is sort of one of those crazy things that I don't remember if I've ever said it out loud, but it felt very... Maybe it didn't feel normal because it sticks out to me. And I don't have a lot of really strong memories of my childhood that are very specific. I know the landscape of my childhood, but there are some things that are fuzzy. My parents were on a missions trip. I don't remember where they were, but I was staying with the head pastor's family. And let's see, how old was I? I would have been under the age of 5. And I just remember I must have done something that they didn't approve of. And the head pastor spanked me. Yeah. And that was very, like, he felt like that was his place to do that. Right. He had 6 kids. He was a father figure. He, this is, you discipline a child. That's what they did. And now when I say that, I'm just like, ew.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, and just the level of entitlement to just, I don't know. I mean, I just think that says a lot,
And you know what is mental about it as well? I mean, again, I don't know the guy at all, but I can imagine, if you, back in the day, spanking is more common. You absolutely lose it. Someone's sleeping over wherever and you spank them, but you would on some level be like, shit, I hope she doesn't say anything to her parents. I guarantee this pastor was like, they would be fine. They would be like, oh, okay, thank you for disciplining our child. Thank you for not sparing the rod. Thank you. Like in that high control environment, that guy isn't even thinking, oh shit, I hope she doesn't say anything. Or, do you know what I mean? Like, he's literally genuinely like, I did the right thing and everyone will agree with me. Like, oh man,
absolutely.
It's wild.
Absolutely.
It's wild.
It really is. It really is.
Another surprise, not surprised.
Right. I mean, that's I don't know what the word for that is. There's got to be a word for that. Where you
I bet the Germans have a phrase. They always have like a big long word that means that exact thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But one of the other examples of this pastor, just wielding power that I don't even know who else would have this kind of power. I don't know what other position, even maybe in government, maybe high up in government, which is essentially what this was. It's just a microcosm.
Sure.
You've got this little, bubble. And, so my sister, who was fine with me telling this story, she got pregnant when she was a teenager. The guy was I think he was in college, and I don't know that he was a member of the church, but pastor's plan to fix this, because it was, of course, purity culture. I mean, you could not get pregnant outside. I never saw a pregnant teenager outside of an unwed mother's home, which is another really fun thing from charismatic churches. But he told her she either had to get up in front of the congregation, which I think was probably around 3,000 people at the time, and confess her sin and apologize and all of that, or leave the church. And so she left. She went to like an unwed mother's home in another state, gave her baby up for adoption, and then came back. But
Jesus. What year is this? Like, I'm
talking about like 1993. Right. I'm not talking about 1893.
I got on this complete like rabbit trail like about 4 months ago. This is an ADHD thing where I got so into it for like 3 weeks and I never touched it again. But I started doing my family tree and I found out that my dad's mother, so my grandmother, she was born because basically out of wedlock, her mother was sent away to another town, disappeared for 9 months, gave birth, came back, and there's a child there that like was given up for adoption, basically. But that happened to her mother as well. And it was a system. And it was like, that was how we used to do things in 1930, in 1910. Like that was regular thing in my family, apparently. But like, not 1990. I mean, Jesus Christ.
And especially egregious is that this was at a time when we were so deep in the pro-life movement.
Right. Yeah. This is the height of that whole kind of like,
that's the sister who got arrested protesting at Planned Parenthood. But there was no grace for her to be able to have a baby, which is your whole platform that you're resting everything on, is the right to life, you know, and all of this stuff. And you, we had rallies, we had marches. It was a big deal. And you're going to tell a 17-year-old girl that there is zero support for you here unless you do it either exactly the way we say. And we all know, you and I know, if she had stayed and confessed her sin, how comfortable would it have really been for her there?
Oh, not at all. Not at all.
Right.
On any level.
You know, like not even a little bit. The big scarlet A, you know. And
thousands of people. Like it's literally dragging your issue. Like you have this situation which you're, you know, presumably as a teenage girl probably didn't plan to get pregnant here. So this is like a big fuck up on some level of like, shit, what's happened? I've ruined my life. This is not good. Like she needs all the help and support she can have, whatever that looks like. And instead it's well, first of all, let's make sure thousands of people know you fucked up first. And then we'll think about how we support you. And it won't be the support of whatever you need. It'll be the support of whatever we feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
That is not how you support someone. You don't air their issues and their pain and their hurt and their struggle to thousands of people, all of which you are not going to be like, oh, great. Well, I'll come in and help in every way. She can stay with us. We'll help raise the kid. You know, no. We're being told so we can be, quote unquote, praying for her / judging the shit out of her.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's basically what it is. This is going to make Sunday lunch really great for a lot of you.
Yes.
Like, that's basically what we're doing here, right?
Exactly. I mean, you think about and that's where, you know, the purity culture really, that's the crescendo, right, of purity culture, is that, to his credit, I guess, I'm using quotes, the pastor's credit, later his son and her, you know, his girlfriend slipped up and they had to get up in front of the Christian school, which I also went to for a while, and confess their sin and all that stuff. But it's just like, what I didn't see him whenever he stole thousands of dollars from the congregation that he said was going to one thing and went to, you know, maybe a new car, or I could say some worse things that I know that the money went to. You didn't get up and confess in front of the congregation that you stole money out of their pockets. You know, there's never any, the double standard is all I'm talking about. It's just,
because it's not about reconciliation or, you know, confession, right? It's about power. And this is a thing I can hold over you now. And this is a thing that keeps you in your place. It keeps you in that standing. Whereas if I was to do that, well, I'd lose some power. No, I keep my power. This is not for me. This is a tool that I use to maintain power and keep people in their place ultimately. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it's hard to overstate how much power a person like that has. It really is. It's hard to exaggerate it. You know, like it is exactly like it sounds, just total control. Yeah. Well,
and it is, I mean, I put out a study this week. I was sharing some stuff from a study on what's happening to the US church and like how smaller churches are shrinking, larger churches are growing quite well. And it's interesting, you know, like we look at these dynamics of power, and I look at, you know, smaller regular mom pop churches in, rural America, and a huge portion of them are lovely, wonderful places doing really hard. I saw a study last week. They had done a study in America and asked people, how many of you think that your local church has benefited the community during COVID? And I think 72% of people said it had. And what's is 58% of people that do not identify as Christians say that they have seen their local church benefit the community, as in doing food banks, getting prescriptions for people that are ill, things like that. They listed all the different things, and there was different percentages and stuff. So across the boards, we live in a bit of a bubble, and I always like to remind myself of that. Yeah. Across the boards, people are looking at, your regular Joe church and going, these are the kind of good people. Like, this pastor's probably a decent person just trying to help people. He didn't get in it to buy a new Tesla and have a multi-million-dollar mansion and fuck some, prostitutes on a yacht. That's not likely for Pastor Jerry of a church of 28 people, who's making 20,000 a year and scraping by, and also working for someone in his church selling cars at the car sales dealership. Totally. A lot of these people are just regular, decent people. And I think there is this dynamic of like how power corrupts. And I think often in these smaller environments, it's a lot harder for that kind of power to corrupt. Maybe all 20 people in his congregation come to him for advice and for guidance and for support. But when you're overseeing and helping and guiding and supporting 20 people, it's a lot harder to feel like a god than when you do it for 5,000. Yes. And when you don't even speak to those 5,000, actually you have a team of 20 people who do it for you, and those 20 people report to you, and you just have them beck and call, they have to make appointments to even speak with you, it's a different thing. It's the same deal that, like most small town businesses, right, which are just like, Julie running her business, and she maybe has like a couple of teenagers working part-time, and that's it. Yeah. Probably not on the same kind of power trip that the CEO of Shell is, right? I bet you CEO of Shell is on a motherfucking huge power trip, right? I mean, they've knowingly been destroying the environment since like the 40s or whatever. They've knowingly done it, and they're cool, right? So these are different dynamics that I think there is something about these levels of power. When you start to be Jerry Falwell and you literally own a city, the cops report to you. Ugh, it's just nuts. That's so huge. Like that tax at that level, church. Anything, tax a fucking church. Yeah, seriously. Sorry. But I'm so intrigued by it. But I love those little studies that I come across every now and again that kind of remind me, there's like regular people out there that probably are just going, I believe in a God, and I really believe that it should be that I help people, and that's basically what I'm doing day in, day out. And they probably fuck up, and they probably still do things that are not healthy, and maybe they still are pro life in a very unhealthy way or something like that. I'm not saying everyone out there is perfect.
They're still only affecting 20 people.
But they're affecting 20 people. And probably in that environment, the 20 people, they probably feel on some level capable of going, hey, pastor, I'm not sure I agree with that. I've been in a lot of small churches where there feels like there's more of a back and forth. Sure. Never felt that when you pop in. I remember like in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, I went to Mark Driscoll's church when I was over in the States. I wanted to visit because I loved Mark Driscoll when I was growing up. I can't think what age I was, probably 20, 19. And I wanted to visit. And I was just like, I remember just being there and just going, oh my God, no one would ever get to see this guy. Like there was so many layers of security before it. And I come from the UK, like we just don't have big churches. A big church for us is a couple hundred people. Right. And I was just like, wow, like these people are so removed. Like he will never know what it's like to be me.
No.
And he'll never care. Concept. And he will never care about that. It's just interesting, these different dynamics, because I really wonder what it is that turns narcissists are attracted to those positions, but that's true in business as well. If you look at the CEOs of companies, the level of narcissism is higher, but it's about the same as in church. It's not that church specifically attracts more narcissists than any large organization. So it's not that it turns people into narcissists. Some people are. But what does it do to people? How does it? I don't know. It's just
it certainly gives you a really big soapbox and a megaphone, I should say. Because that's the other thing, is that I don't know of a situation where I could walk into a theater downtown and listen to a stand-up comic and go, I know sitting down that I'm going to agree with everything this man is saying, or this woman. It's never a woman in the church, not here. I know their values, and I know that I can just trust everything and just go, yeah. We're on the same page. We're both comics, whatever it is, it doesn't work that way. But when you walk into a church where it's the same denomination, or where they stand on things that are the basics, like, LGBTQ rights, or obviously lack thereof, being pro-life, quote unquote, being conservative politically, all these things. If you know that, that's enough for you. And you just go, oh, okay, yeah, I'm going to default to agreeing with you. Maybe I might have a couple of little qualms, but that was rare, in my world. It was not, you weren't critiquing when you walked in to listen to someone speak.
Sure.
So I think that's the difference, is that you believe you have this common thing. And that's that's the basis of Christian nationalism, which is a really big, just topic that I'm angry about. But that is that belief that, well, we're all on the same page with this, and we're not. But when you walk into a church and you see the name, if it's a gateway church, which is big here, there's a lot of them. You're gonna, well, I can pretty much say that I'm gonna agree with everything this guy says, so the guy can say anything. Because you walked in going, he's a man of God, or we're all Christians. We all share the same faith. We're using the same Bible and the same gospel. So I'm going to agree with anything this man says.
Yeah.
I know that can happen other places, but it sure helps to walk in and say, we have the same value system, you know?
Well, there's a security in that, right? I mean, there's something nice about going into a room and going, oh, these people get me. They understand what I believe in. I understand what they believe in. We all kind of agree. I'm not going to be stepping on eggshells. That's a nice feeling for sure.
Yeah.
But what it does do as well, though, is when that's the default, is we all agree. It means when I come into the room and I suddenly think, oh, I don't agree with that, I'm not just disagreeing with the pastor. I think I'm disagreeing with everyone in the room. But it might be that everyone in the room thinks this pastor's fucking nuts, but I shouldn't speak up because we all agree with and we all believe the same thing. So you don't even know that half the people next to you go, oh, what did you think of the sermon? Oh, yeah, it was good, wasn't it? And yeah, oh, sure, yeah. And then both people are thinking, fuck, it was a bit fucked up, but I'm not going to say anything. And there's not room to have those kind of conversations on that peer-to-peer level. Any discourse about how we disagree with the pastor, because we assume everyone agrees with the pastor.
Yeah.
And so it shuts it down even more. There's even less conversation happening because of that. Yeah.
I've heard of, I'm sure you do too. I can't imagine what your inbox looks like all the time.
It's just unread forever. And I just try and bounce them as quick as I can.
But I just, every day getting messages from people saying, I just hear so many stories is what I'm trying to say. So many stories of church. And, even with my relatively small following, I can count on one hand the number of times someone has told me, this thing that this pastor said was so egregious that someone got up and walked out. Just does not happen. It just doesn't happen. It has to be they have to be spewing such disgusting things from the pulpit for someone to walk out. And that is crazy. It's one of them was someone who had, this is just with a trigger warning, but someone had suicide in their family, and the pastor had made a motion like a gun to his head, and it was very, I guess it was a small enough church that everybody knew what had happened and all this stuff, and it was like rude enough of him to do that the family got up and walked out. Like, that's what it took for someone to get up and walk out, was him to, anyway, but I think that it just takes so much more for people to stand up and say something about someone who is, a leader in Christianity like that. But I think that I also feel like, I can talk about all the terrible things about church all day, but at the end of the day, that's not why I'm not a Christian anymore. It's about theology. It's not about the church, because I can be a Christian at home, whatever I can. I was for a long time.
Yeah. But a lot of people manage to do that just fine.
Yeah. But at some point for me, it was like, this is I don't want to say crazy because I don't want people to feel like I think they're crazy, because I really don't.
Sure.
I do not feel like anyone who is still in Christianity is crazy or they're blind or anything. I mean, I don't feel that way, but it just came to a point for me where that circular thinking of God is all powerful. He sends his son to save us from his being all powerful. And then it just goes around like that. Yeah. So you've got, what is the point here?
Yeah.
What is the point? And I think that I just can't believe, I come from a pretty educated family, all college educated, we discuss lots of cultural things and history, and all very really into literature, big readers, all that stuff. And I'm not trying to brag about it, but what I'm saying is I come from that background, and I still didn't know so much about how Christ is so similar to other figures. That blew my mind. Like, there were other people, because they talk about, the virgin birth, and that's what makes it so unique. And, he was the son of God and stuff. And I'm like, I can name 5 now who were the same, so that's something. But I don't know. The further I go, I just think, man, what other book would we look at from that time?
Yeah.
And build our whole lives around
everything around it. Yeah. And look at really nuanced modern issues and go, okay, this new thing that we haven't even known is a thing for more than 100 years. We've just kind of discovered it. Yeah. Let's look back at what these people that were banging sticks and stones together think about it, right? I mean, maybe a little bit beyond that, but not much. Not much beyond that.
No. And
just astonishing.
No. Yeah. Well, and it also helps to whitewash everything. Because if you go back and pretend like they had some sort of great high sacred knowledge that they got, you can really excuse a lot of that, whenever the reality was, according to the Bible, they really did prescribe cutting a baby in half if the 2 women disagreed on whose it was. That happened, it's in the Bible. Even if I don't believe it happened, plenty of people do, and take it. I mean, biblical literalism is another thing. It was just like, that was a
whole other level.
Yeah. I mean, that was us for sure. I don't know about you, but
yeah, for sure. I mean, I was unaware that there was any other real way to read it for at least, until I was in my early 20s. I started to come across people that would be like, no, that's not, I don't read it literally.
And did you think they were going to hell? Or did you think they were?
I think in Europe, we are probably a little bit more lenient on the whole. So like, of course, even growing up, like, of course, I didn't believe that the Bible, that Earth was made in 6 actual days, or I didn't believe that the Earth was 6,000 years old. I'm like, I don't know many people in the UK that do. There is a big resurgence of Christianity. The Christianity that's strong and thriving in the UK right now is Christianity that's been exported from America. All the churches that are feeding from, who knows, all the big churches, all the mega churches, they're feeding from that kind of culture and environment because they're seeing it work in America. And it is working for some of them here. And so they do tend to be the most extreme, and they do tend to be like, no, definitely the Bible 6 days, etc. But a lot of that's political. It's like, we can't really have good connections with you over in Texas or California or, wherever, if we don't really have the same thing. It's a weird dynamic. You even see people here that, like, pastors that have often been quite central or left leaning in the UK, now going, but Trump was definitely God's elected. And I'm like, wow, you would have said that, Bernie Sanders was a good start. Do you know what I mean? It's like, that's where we are over in the UK going, okay, but what he's pushing for, pretty normal and standard. And yet, because of the political connections with the churches in America that they're trying to pull from, it's amazing the ways that people suddenly let go of a whole host of their values, of their things, so they can curry that favor with the right person. It's a really weird dynamic to see play out. Really, really weird. But I think certainly for me growing up, it wouldn't have been so crazy if someone had gone, I don't believe that, or I believe in evolution. I remember, I still feel sick to the day. I remember having an argument at university with my lecturer, who was one of the leading experts in the world on artificial intelligence.
Oh my gosh.
And he was doing a lecture for us on how, when you're writing artificial intelligence, basically you're mimicking evolution. You're basically trying to mimic that process where it's evolving step by step and building on itself bit by bit. And the best artificial intelligence develops by error. It develops by trial and error and just growing and growing. So that was his whole thing, was that. And I remember sticking my hand up and going, yeah, but evolution isn't real. And having an argument with him at 17 years old at university, having an argument with this guy who was on the leading team in Japan that developed the first artificial intelligence in the 90s or whatever. And you're just like, fuck, I want to die, right? I want to die right now thinking back.
Burrow into a hole thinking about that.
So I like to pretend I wasn't that fundamental. I was a bit more, open, but I remember things like that. And I was like, no, I must have been pretty damn fundamental still, though.
Yeah.
Certainly for the UK standards.
Yeah. It is crazy. I just recently just remembered how, and it's funny to say remember because it was such a normal part of my life, but really truly believing that anything that led to Indigenous people getting saved, quote unquote, was fair game.
Right.
And I don't, I probably disagreed with things in the Crusades and things, all those kind of things. Like if it was that quote unquote extreme, because my textbooks didn't really teach that what happened to the Indigenous people was genocide, right. Or cultural rape, and literal rape. I can't believe that I used to think that was, that Manifest Destiny was what it was. And it was the way. It must have been God's plan. It must have been, and just all of those. The colonialism is not, you cannot separate it.
No, it is inherently part of what it is.
Yeah. And Christianity. Yeah. I mean,
it's Pauline Christianity, right? So Paul, right from the beginning, is going, we need to go into these people groups and make them Christian. That is the goal. That was what Jesus wanted us to do.
And it's never stopped. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking back last night, knowing we were going to talk about some of this stuff. And I just remember what I see now is just blatantly racist belief that all of, the dark continent of Africa was just full of demonic activity. That's what we learned. We learned that it was, and people would come, missionaries would come, or even people from different countries, people from Ghana would come and say, oh yeah, I've seen all this stuff. And I don't want to, their experience is their experience. But when I'm talking about, a white male pastor who spent his whole life in South Louisiana, and he goes over there and sees their culture and says, oh, it's just totally demonic. Everything about it is demonic. And these people they're sick and they're dying because of all the demonic activity. And I'm like, I don't think that's why they're sick and they're dying. But now, at the time I didn't believe that. I thought, oh, sure, they don't have God's favor, and that's a big thing. Yeah. It's and to kind of go off on another sort of tangent, but that when we're talking about God's favor, that was another thing that sort of led to me beginning to deconstruct. I had kind of put God on the shelf after this happened, but my son, which I'm sure a lot of people who follow me know, when he was 2, he had a stroke, and it was totally out of the blue. He was a very healthy child. He had a stroke, and we didn't know if he would live. For 11 days in the ICU. It was just terrifying. He became disabled from that. So he has a lot of trouble walking, and some upper limb, difficulty and stuff. Cognitively, he's the same, but that was sort of a wake-up call, because I really had been taught, especially from my mom, she had reinforced all of this, that if you had the favor of God, or if you served God or whatever, that he would protect you. And I know that I have some followers who take issue with that, because they're like, well, that's not ever what the Bible says. And I'm like, well, that's what I was taught forever. Was
whether that's in the Bible or not, people found it in the Bible and they taught it as though that's all the Bible says.
Yeah. And so that was a really big change for me, was just to go, oh, okay. And even to the point that this was so, it had permeated our lives so much, even to the point where I had 2 friends growing up about 10 years apart that died in car accidents. family friends, and both of them, my mother was really good friends with their mothers, both of them. And this is I hate even telling this story, but my mother almost gave an explanation for why one of the daughters had died, because the mother of the girl who died had been divorced and remarried a few times. Like, she had explained that, well, maybe God hates divorce and it's a sin, so maybe that's what happened. Maybe right. Like I can't say it the way she said it. It was a little more, she was very careful about her words, but I remember thinking, oh, okay, so if you do everything right, maybe you'll just be protected. Like, that was not maybe, like, for sure. That was the belief.
When things happen that are bad, it's because you fucked up somewhere.
Absolutely.
And I remember this. I remember as a teenager, like, God, every time as a teenager you watch porn, which for me was like 18 times a day because I was a teenager. But right. Like, you're like literally like, okay, better not cross the road yet because I'm not entirely sure I'm protected smoked. Yet. Right. Yeah. So it's like, I need to have enough time where I'm like good enough and I pray. And I was a grace guy. I believe in God's grace, but I'm still going, I need to, I'm not entirely sure of that grace. Maybe I'll just get another bit longer of like being good. Yeah. Then I'll ask for forgiveness enough, like, whatever. But like, and as a teenager, God, the windows were not long enough, right? I mean, hormones are going all the time. Like, but like, I do remember thinking, I remember like being fearful, getting in a car going like, but God knows I masturbated yesterday. I watched porn and like, I might die in a crash on the highway. Like, so that might happen. And and it's not because God's judging me. It's that Satan's out there to get me. He's roaming back and forth. Right.
It's because God loves you.
It's because God can't protect me anymore because I rejected God. I rejected his gift, or just all sorts of weird and crazy things that I 100% believed, even if they weren't expressly taught to me. Hearing things like that, right? Hearing people say things like that. You can make your conclusions. You can add two together. You're a teenager. You're not like one. Like, you can put the dots together and go, oh, this is what you're saying here. You believe on some level, if you do the wrong thing, you get punished. If you do the right thing, you get rewarded. And hey, I can open my Bible and find that in there. I can find it say the opposite. I can. But I can certainly find it say this. And I can find it say it a lot. Like, it happens a lot throughout the Bible. Yeah. You do good, you get good. You do bad, you get bad.
Right, right.
That's constantly the result. I mean, like, David's like, God performs a post-birth abortion on David's child because he cheated. Yeah. That's like, and we talk about God being pro-life. He literally killed David's baby because he cheated.
Yeah.
God's like, okay, I forgive you, but I'm going to kill your baby. And now, God didn't say that at any point. Some guy called Nathan, right? Or the prophet or whatever shows up and goes, this is what God's going to do. And he dies. And, but he's basically just doing what your mom did on some level, going, that's probably why they died, is because you cheated. And it's probably God just, couldn't protect, or God's kind of like letting nature run its course, or punishing, or, we're fleshing out some ideas, but basically boils down to this very archaic karmic concept of do good, get good, do bad, get bad.
Yeah.
Which again, all the way through the Bible is people going, hey God, how come I'm doing good and I get punished? And how come all these fucking assholes out there are getting all the good stuff? Right. Yeah. Which, if ever there was a message for today's world, I think that's it. Right. How the fuck does Bezos get that much money in that yacht?
Yeah.
Right? You're trying to be a good person here.
Yeah. That's more true than
anything. Right.
Yeah.
But the answer is because you're all masturbating too much. That's basically what it boils down to.
God. Yeah.
Bezos must have this, like, just the purity of intent. That's it. Just perfect.
That's what it is. Yeah. Well, capitalism is God given, right? I mean, it's the way of the Bible, according to everybody I know. No.
Oh man, it's terrifying. It's just wild. These are the systems that we believe in on some level, and whether you explicitly are taught them or not, if you grow up in these environments, most of us growing up in these environments do pick up on that, and that's how we think, and it affects the way we live our lives. Whether we could go, oh, I heard a pastor say it this time. We know, this is what the outcome is.
I've had people this week, just because sometimes I go a little more hard on the jokes, and I, say things that are a little more blunt, and I get people saying, wow, did your pastor really tell you that? Gosh, that's not biblical, and all this stuff. And I'm like, first of all, almost anything is biblical. Let's just put that out there.
Yeah.
You can use it to justify just about anything. But beyond that, I don't know what you think I mean. Do you think that I mean that the pastor said this tweet that I posted that was satire? Like, no, of course he didn't. Of course he didn't say,
right.
Well, all queer people are going to hell. No, of course he didn't say exactly that. Some pastors do, of course. Mine didn't. But gosh, wasn't it implied? Like, can't you put, like you said, we put 2 and 2 together. It does not take a big leap in logic to say, well, the Bible says this about homosexuality for me to go, okay, so you do believe that queer people are going to hell. That is what you believe, and you're going to save them from themselves by twisting everything and ruining their lives. I have some people who run very big Christian accounts, let's just say that, who have been saying, oh gosh, I'm so sorry that was your experience. And I'm just like, Godspeed, buddy.
It's so funny to me. This is one of my favorite things about running a meme account is that people think you are always like you'll just be like me doing this, and it's just, you got to make it funny. You got to make it snappy. You got to make it punchy, and you got to kind of use broad strokes, right? So when you say Christians and then you use a trope or something, and they're like, I'm not saying not every Christian, some Christians are. I'm like, of course they're not. That's like saying, isn't it funny that Americans are like this? Of course I know that some Americans aren't like that.
Right.
But people, they just can't. They just shut down. And of course, they're not the Christian that is like that. But almost 100% of the time, what's funny is they are. Like, it's not the Christian. It's like not a homophobic asshole. Isn't the one messaging you going, hey, look, not all Christians are homophobic. No, it's the homophobic asshole. Everybody. They're going, hey, look, not all Christians are homophobic. I'm like, but you are.
But you are.
Why are
you
even defending those people? Like,
oh my gosh.
So weird.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, what was it? So where are you? Where do you live around?
So I'm in Manchester in England. So it's in the northwest of England.
Okay. Yeah. I was just wondering, because I know that you've spent time in the States. I didn't know how long or when you moved back.
I was in California for 4 years, but it was a long time ago, probably in 2012, I think I came back.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
I was going to ask you what it was like to watch. I kind of lumped them together because the COVID and Trump thing came to a head at the same time. Just wondering what that was like to watch from abroad.
Weird. But, well, I mean, everyone I mean, in the UK, we've got a fucked up system right now. We've got a crazy nut job in charge. We've got a very right-wing government that's trying to privatize our entire country for the last 10 years. They've been doing it more than that now.
It's working really well, isn't it?
Selling off our public health care. During COVID, they're selling off huge portions of the NHS and things. And you're just like, oh my God. So we've got some issues, right? So it's very hard for me to point fingers and go, look at the stupid Americans over there, because we're emulating you guys. I don't know.
But I'm asking.
What stood out really for me, which was interesting, is when I was in America. So I was at a place called Bethel. You probably know of it. You charismatic backgrounds, you know of Bethel. So I was there, and I got there like 2008 September, and it was right in the height of them electing the new president, and it was going to be Obama, or it was going to be, I'm trying to think, was Romney, the first one?
I think
Romney the first one, and then McCain was after, or was it McCain first and then it was Romney?
McCain first, right? Gosh, I can't believe I don't remember that.
I don't remember which way it was, but I think it was McCain. And I remember just going, gosh, this is crazy. This whole thing is like really wild. And then I remember 2012, I was there again for that. And I'm like, the big thing that stood out to me was I was a Brit, and I remember watching this go down, and I remember how much they constantly demonized Obama. And I was like, I can't see. Now, I still had not become on any level particularly anti-racist. I hadn't really worked on any kind of racial biases and all these different things. But even in the midst of it, I was like, this guy says he's a Christian. He's a really great president. Like, he seems really good. And you're telling me that the Mormon, the people group that Christians hate the most because they're kind of like us and they say they're Christian. Like, Christians hate Mormons. They hate Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses with a passion, probably more than like Muslims or other groups of of religion, because they're false. Yeah, they're like, whatever, they're cults and whatever. And I love so many of my good friends are ex-Mormon, ex-JWs and stuff. And it's so funny looking at it going, you guys were just like us. Like, you weren't that different, really. It was just the same deal. But we were so scared of that. But you guys put forward a Republican candidate that's Latter-day Saints, and immediately we're like, that's the Christian guy. All of Christianity turns around and goes, oh no, he's the Christian choice. He's the Christian vote. He's God's choice. And I'm like, you want the guy that's a cult, like a part of a cult, over the guy that's actually a Christian, goes to church, prays, talks about how he has a Christian faith in quite a genuine way, it seems.
Right.
I'm like, I can only see one major difference here. And it's and that really was weird.
It's hard to separate the two, because it was totally, I mean, I was definitely racist. I saw tons of racist, I don't even know, just diatribes against him.
Sure.
But at the same time, you can also follow the other pattern, which is Republican is God's choice. Yeah. I mean, Republican is God's choice. Democrat is the Antichrist. Republican is God's choice. Democrat, and you can just follow it down ever since Reagan, or maybe just before Reagan. That was, and I mean, Reagan, you could go on about that forever, but that was just a whole new level of Christian nationalism. It's just that came in with him. But I don't know. I mean, I'm reading this book that one of the things they talked about, and I was going to share a clip of it, a little excerpt from it later today on my account, but it's just this thing about, I'm laughing, but it's about the KKK, like post Reconstruction in America after the Civil War. So not the KKK that was sort of around right after, but later in the early part of the 20th century. And it was just incredible, the things that they were saying that are just like the things that the Trump supporters are saying now. It's not any different. And they just like with the Proud Boys or these, Boogaloo Boys, all these people who they're like, well, but they're trying to protect, the Constitution and the fact that America is a Christian nation and all this stuff. And that is exactly what evangelicals said about the KKK. Exactly the same thing. That Christianity is the true American religion. And it's just, there's nothing new under the sun, I mean, well, the rapture's pretty new, but there's like, it's just amazing to see, like, we're 100 years out from that, and we've just done it in a different way. And it's disturbing to hear a lot of people like that I went to high school with or grew up in church with, who really just think that we should have just like a parallel society for because we're too different, we're too different. And it's like, I mean, now with COVID, I'm like, well, yeah, if all the unvaccinated healthcare workers want to work at their own hospital, that's fine. Like, go for that. If that's what you want, you want to go somewhere where nobody's vaccinated, be my guest. But
you're going to be busy as a healthcare worker. There.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. But
it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's interesting as well, because what they ultimately want is some sort of monarchy, right? I mean, what they want is some pastor. If all the Christians just want this pastor, all the, whatever, they just want this person in charge to be a leader I go through, right? Like he tells us, he dictates, like, and that's what they wanted Trump to be. That's why they loved a good executive order or something like that. It was just like, yes. And it's such a fascinating dynamic. And it's interesting to me as well, because the differences at play are so minute as well. We can say that, lives are lost because Republican presidents get in. Absolutely. But Democrats bomb more countries than Republicans. Like, they actually kill more civilians than Republicans. You can say, well, Democrats in office, abortion rates go down, and there's less stuff going on there if that's important to you and lives. And there's all sorts of different components here. Like this, so it's not black and white. But these two people, whoever it is that you vote in, have no power really in the grand scheme of things. Right. Most of them, they just get caught up in red tape. They never really perform any of their promises, right? Did Trump suddenly make it illegal for anyone to have an abortion throughout the nation? No, I don't understand how Christians keep thinking if they vote a Republican candidate, abortion will suddenly become illegal. Now, I know you're in Texas, so like, let's not even, I can't even, it's just fuck me. What the hell?
It's disgusting.
But the point is, again, it's a prime example of like, actually, a lot of the power is not in this random person that you stick in the White House. And yet we put everything on that because it's this power game. It's a total power game. And it's just a total shit show. It really is. I don't even know the words, and I'm over in the UK. I can't even talk. Like, you know, again, we have people in power that have no power. It's government. It's you know, it's the people behind the government are businesses. It's the elites. It's the people that control media. You know.
I try to just, it's always the drum that I'm banging. It's just vote in local elections, vote in your local elections, vote in your local elections. Please do it. It will affect your life way more than who is president usually. But that was just one of the things. That was when I really started to question like the church in general, was just like Trump rising to power. Yeah. Like not even after he was elected, I was like, okay, who is this clown? Like and it was like a bad dream, you know, that whole thing. Cause I was still pretty sort of borderline conservative. I had a lot of liberal values personally, but I kind of thought that the government should be more conservative. Sure. I do not feel that way now. But with COVID and then the Trump like insanity just kind of coming to a head, those two things, I was like, oh, this isn't just an accident that this is all happening at the same time. This is what they stand for. This is what the evangelical church stands for. This is, you know, that became really clear that it was, like Trump isn't a one-off. He's exactly what you wanted. Just like you said, like this was your goal, was to have someone like this who can, you know, answer, I don't even know how to describe it. I mean, it's like an idol, I guess that would be the easiest way, but just, you know, something that you can sort of put all of your faith in. And, and then just seeing how churches handled COVID was just, maddening. There's no words for how angry it was, like watching people just continue as if nothing was going on and as if it wasn't going to affect healthcare workers. And so.
What's interesting to me, and again, you live in a bubble because you're over in Louisiana. Oh no, you're in Texas, but you know, you can say a potato sometimes.
Still in the Bible Belt,
but you know, like we all live in these bubbles, and I think the internet it you know throws gasoline on the fire of those bubbles as well. Again, where you know I look at that statistic that was out there, or the set of statistics, it said the vast majority of Americans looked at churches, whether they were Christian or not, and said most churches are making things better during the pandemic. The amount of people that said making it worse were really small. Most said either it made no difference or it made things better.
Right.
And you crack open Facebook, which God forbid no one should ever do, but you know, you crack open Facebook, Instagram, whatever, and what's in your face is look at these fucking idiots. Look at this group, look at that group, look at it. And whether you're left leaning, right leaning, you're center, whatever, there's extreme people everywhere, all over the pages. And again, it's this component. I was talking recently with someone. I talk about this study all the time, the perception gap .us study, which is fascinating. So they studied, they got a whole bunch of Democrats, a whole bunch of Republicans. You can go to perceptiongap.us and you can do the study as well. But they basically, I mean, it's tens and tens of thousands of people filled it in. And you basically say, I am a Democrat or a Republican or independent. And then it asks you what you think about a whole bunch of issues, gun issues, abortion, should government be smaller, bigger, whatever. And you fill it in and then you say, and this is what I think other Democrats like me think, or other Republicans think. And this is what I think the other side thinks. And so then it gives scores of like, hey, this is how people vote themselves. And actually the vast majority of everyone that fills in the survey were actually almost all identical. They were all in the same sort of middle center window. They all wanted more control of guns, for example, more control for guns. But they thought that people on their side were way more extreme. And they thought people on the other side were way more extreme. And so the picture of the Republican was all the way over there. And the picture of the Democrat was all the way over there. And whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, you think you're alone. And so it's these crazy pictures and ideas and caricatures we've drawn of each person, right? Yeah. You're either Donald Trump or you're AOC, you know, whether those are good or bad or whatever. You're two polar opposites. Where the vast majority go, actually, I'm just kind of here. And that's where everyone else seems to be as well, but you can't talk about it. Because if they go, oh, I voted Republican, oh, you're Donald Trump.
Right.
No, actually, I just was a bit fed up and I wanted to change.
Or
actually, I just really think that abortion is killing babies, and I really think that's the only way to stop it. And okay, you haven't, you don't know any other way. Okay, cool. So you're not actually Donald Trump. You're not going around sexually harassing women. You're not going around X, Y, Z. But people can't. I think we do this all the time, and I think we do it with. I think there's a danger in the deconstruction community, somewhat of us doing this ourselves, of potentially becoming the voice of the caricature version of people that are leaving the church, where actually most people leave the church aren't seething with rage and, and most people within church aren't absolutely fucking insane, right? Generally, like we spent enough time in churches to know the vast majority of people in churches are just regular good people that just, that's how they live their lives. That's how they see the world. That's how they feel connected to God. And I'm really intrigued by that dynamic. Like, can you talk to me about, you run an account, it's very popular. I mean, you mentioned earlier, your tiny little account, it's huge. I mean, it's growing so fast. I'm blown away. Like, I'm not blown away though. That's the thing. I think you're honestly, apart from myself, obviously the funniest account out there. Like, I genuinely think you have the best memes
thanks.
In this space, period.
Thank you so much.
And so I know why you're growing fast. It's because you're speaking for people. You have great humor about it. You've got a great eye for comedy and also a great insight into important issues.
Thank you.
But how do you navigate that? Do you think about this sort of stuff? Do you think about how you portray Christianity, the church, yourself, people that are deconstructing? Because in a way as well, when we're writing memes, we're not writing memes about ourselves, right?
No, there's plenty of
memes for our audience, right?
Yeah.
We're speaking for this group, but when you speak for this group, there's the group that it really is, and there's the group identity that is almost this kind of like caricature in a sense. Do you think about that stuff? I think about that a lot, and I don't know how I navigate it.
I that's kind of my answer. I don't really know. I try to, you want to say things like, for me, my perspective is, okay, if I know a few people who I've talked to this about, then I know that it's at least a communal experience to some level. It doesn't always work. We know sometimes you post something, people are like, huh? Like, oh, okay. That's not a great joke, but as far as I'm so early in my deconstruction phase, because this was really just a few months ago, that I'm still fine with being angry. Do you know what I mean?
Of course.
So
and anger, and I don't want to say that anger isn't fair either. It's just important to be, because that's where a lot of people are.
I didn't get that impression at all. I think that it's cathartic, of course. That's a big part of why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I just wasn't, so many of us, we weren't allowed to say all this stuff. And this is a safe space where we can say it kind of freely, Yeah. And I have always really just been, I'm just the family clown. Like, I'm the person who I'm the one telling all the jokes, and everybody, my highest compliment is just for someone to laugh at something I say. That's always my goal. I think more about the comedy than I do probably about how I come across to people.
That's me to a T as well. My wife is always like, you're putting comedy over people here. I'm like, damn it.
But you kind of, if as long as you're trying to be sensitive, and I had a faux pas the other day that people did not like, and I understand why. I think that, some things have to be left on the table for comedy to be. Yeah. And especially with something as sensitive as this, I can't consider most people's feelings, as long as they're not just totally offensive and, really mean or really rude. I don't want to tread too lightly, because I want people to know, like, hey, it's okay for you to think that this is really fucked up. Yeah. And I don't want to pull any punches unless I just, unless I feel like I need to. So I try not to do that for other people who, and try to, not dumb it down, but, water it down. So yeah, I don't know. do you think about that a lot? I feel like I don't really
I think
know
about everything all the time.
Well, I mean, I do too. I'm an overthinker, but
yeah, but I mean, I'm very conscious, and I've made posts about this recently. You know, like I have been deconstructing for a very long time, and I have my own worldview and the way I construct my life and the way I live my life. And if I'm honest, in my day-to-day life, if this wasn't my job, if it wasn't what I do, and I love what I do, so I love doing it, and that's not going to change. But if I didn't do this, I wouldn't follow any deconstruction accounts. I wouldn't listen to any podcasts about this stuff. I don't care. Like, it's just so detached from where I'm at now. So it's really interesting. So I try and make it clear for people. I'm like, hey, this poem I just wrote is from the perspective of someone that's deconstructing. It's written based on the thousands of conversations I've had. It's written by you, not by me. This meme that I just made, I don't really give a fuck about that. I used to, but actually it's not even based on what I feel right now. It's maybe based on what I used to feel like, or maybe it's, I'm working with thousands of people that are going through this emotion, and I'm trying to find other people that are going through that so I can help them. Because to me, the memes are a vehicle. The memes heal, right? There's nothing as healing as laughing, right? And it opens up a whole bunch in us. But to me, it's a vehicle, because I think the memes are shareable, they're relatable. People share them on their stories, and new people discover what I'm doing, and then they get to hear a more in-depth conversation with someone and engage on a more human level, or they get to look at a post that's a bit more in depth, that's talking about how we process some of this stuff, and it's okay to feel like this, and you know, these are some tools or resources that you can go to. So there's this kind of this they're a stepping stone for me, for people. That's why I do the memes. And so I write memes for people that are usually 9 times out of 10 just starting this process, because that's who I want to find. The person that has no idea what's happening to them, no idea who's out there, no idea what kind of space is available for them. And then I want to move beyond that. And so it's a weird one, trying to write a meme for someone that's in a place that I'm not in anymore, and do that. It's an interesting thing, and especially then you catch all the flack for it, right? So then you get all these people going, oh, you're just really hurt and bitter and whatever, and I'm like, I'm not actually, sure, whatever, okay, but I'm really not, like, but okay. These things are just so fascinating, working with people in very different places, because again, you've got people that are, and you'll know this, you've got people that are still very Christian, you've got people that are still quite happy going to church, you've got people that have, you know, found a new church expression that works for them, they do home groups, or they go to a progressive church or something like that, or you've got people that are atheists, or you've got people that are getting into real Eastern Buddhism and Hinduism and Taoism and things like that, and these people are all in very different places. How do you make content that works for them all? Generally you have to go and point back to where they started. What are they moving away from? What are they healing from? And so 9 times out of 10, most of the people aren't in that place anymore. They're looking at reflecting on that, and they're trying to find healing from it. They're trying to move beyond it. But it's a really weird dynamic. I find it really surreal.
It's there are so many things that I post about that aren't where I am anymore, and they were there, you know, and you can kind of, I try not to make it too juvenile, because a lot of my stuff is from my childhood and you know, teenage years, because that's when I was really in the thick of it. And then after that, I just had a little more independence as I got older, into my 20s and early 30s. I'm 34. I had more just separation from my life. Like, if I was, you know, I had my Christianity, but it wasn't quite as like just woven into every single thing I did. And so, I mean, there are lots of things that I post about that I'm like, no, that's not really how I feel, or I'm not listening to a pastor tell me this, or not that it's not really how I feel. It's all how I felt at some point. Like, you know, it's definitely genuine. I'm not making any of it up. But it was how I discovered deconstruction, was someone posting just a joke. And I think that this is, I don't want to, you know, self-aggrandize, or, you know, try to exaggerate like what our role is in this community when, you know, making jokes and that kind of thing. But stories on your Instagram where you just share something, it's a really interesting psychological dynamic, because you can share something to your stories. It's not permanent, and it wasn't yours, you know, so you can just share it and just kind of throw it away. And that is a really powerful thing. It's been a powerful thing for me to share. on my personal account, I'll share a few things just here and there so I can kind of go, this is kind of where I am. I'm leaving church. I don't really believe this anymore. And you kind of just dip your toe in, and it starts a lot of really good conversation so that other people can know what's going on in your life. But for some people, that's all they can do because their families, they can't really talk to their families and all that stuff. And I know that might sound kind of silly, but it's, like you said, it's a stepping stone. And so for me, the first, I think I followed Science Jesus Memes. That was one that I really liked her. Right. Like from my personal account, I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, kind of like, oh my gosh, someone gets it, you know, because you feel so alone once you leave.
Yeah.
And nobody else has been in a high control religion that you're around. You're like, oh, okay, you guys don't relate to this, you know, this crazy story that I have. And then growing up evangelical, she was, I think her name's Natasha, but we kind of connected. I was sending her messages and stuff. And we talked a little bit, and I was like, man, this is like, everything you're saying resonates with me. And that was it matters. That's all. It does matter when you have, I'm so thankful for the people who send messages all the time and just say, oh my gosh, like I felt like I was alone. Your account just resonates with me so much. And I know that maybe they don't think that means anything to me because I don't always get to respond, but man, like that is just so nice to hear because
it is.
I needed that. You know, I think we all needed that at some point. It was just someone to go, oh my God, it's really fucked up that your parents told you there were demons in your room at night. That is wrong. Like it's it's child abuse, you know? And
so wild.
That's a big one for me because my parents were really big into, demonic activity and all that stuff. That was really big. So that's something that's a major thorn in my side and it's going to have to be explored in therapy for many years. But, you know, and even up until like, I don't know, a few years ago, because my son, when that happened, he was 2, he's 6 now. So 4 years ago is when things really started to shift for me, like spiritually. And for that amount of time, you know, even up until the past couple of years, I believed that, you know, I believed in the demonic stuff and all of the, you know, the spiritual war that's always going on behind the veil and all this stuff. So yeah. But
yeah. Wow. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I'm just thinking now, like that would be a good meme. It'd be a good meme right there. You know, kids parent coming in. What's wrong, Timmy? There's a monster in my bed. No, monsters don't exist. Christian kids. There's a monster in my bed. No, there's a monster right here. They're everywhere. They're surrounding you. They're coming for you all the time. Yeah. You can't see them, and they're going to take away your hedge of protection and cause you to die in a car crash. Good night.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
It, I mean, right? Here, read this Frank Peretti novel. You'll be fine.
What the fuck? I know.
In our Patreon group, we have like a monthly Zoom call, and we had one a couple of months ago, and we were all laughing about our crazy childhoods.
Yeah.
And one of the kids, the parents would read them Frank Peretti novels as they went to bed, and I'm like, no. People that don't know that's Frank Peretti's like this kind of like. I guess it's aimed at adults predominantly, I would imagine, but it's like this book on spiritual warfare, and it'd be like about this town that demons are coming and they've got a strategy from Satan to take over the town. And there's a pastor in a small church and they're going to end the church. And they're like, you know, someone loses their keys and it's because this demons hid their keys in another room and then they're causing a car crash. And it's like fucking terrifying really if you're 8, right? I mean, like, it's probably quite fun. I reckon if I went back and read it now, it'd be kind of funny, bizarre kind of comedy. I don't know what it would be, But as an 8-year-old, that's some scary shit. And your parents are going, now here's the thing, Timmy. Real. This is real. This is an instruction manual. This isn't some scary story. This is real life. And it's just like, oh my God, that's what you grew up with.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, man. I mean, that is, and that's something else that we could probably have a whole conversation about is just that when if something has the Christian stamp on it, there is no minimum age. Mm-hmm. They will tell anyone anything. They'll tell the kids about exorcisms. They'll tell the kids about demonic activity or angel, all these kind of weird, crazy things, or Bible stories that are totally inappropriate for kids, like disgusting things that they'll tell. And it's just, man, like I do kind of feel like it's a form of child abuse. And that's where I kind of have to tread the line, because some people are like, well, that's a bit extreme to say that religion can be, just abusive. And it's like, well, if you're telling a kid that they're old enough to decide whether or not they want to go to hell or whether or not they want to spend eternity apart from their family, that's abusive. Like, I'm sorry. I do believe that, and I, even as a Christian, my mom would tell my kids things, before she passed away. And I was like, yeah, I don't want you telling them, like, they're too young to hear these crazy religious, things and about these entities that it's crazy. That part is crazy. Like,
yeah, no, I 100% agree. Yeah. I think it can be really, really abusive. Really, really, I mean, and most of us on some level, maybe not most of us, but a lot of us are dealing with the consequences of that, of growing up with a childhood, being exposed to those kind of terrifying stories. Even having your parents framing things. I know, like, for me, I remember hearing stories. I don't really have a good memory of my childhood, which again, red flag. But
I know, same here.
Right, that's not good.
Yeah.
But my mom telling me, like, oh, when you were like 4, I remember, like, or 3 or something, I remember you smiling and waving while we were sitting on the stairs, and I was getting my keys out for the door, and I was like, oh, who are you smiling at? And you were like, oh, there's a man across the street, and actually it was a demon. So I explained to you that it was a demon, and we had to pray for it to go away. And I'm like, she's retelling me this story, but at 3 years old, she's telling me that kids have imagination, right? You got kids, like, they're just like, oh, there's a man across the street and waving. Like, oh, that's nice. What's his name? You engage it, you play with it. It's actually a really helpful part of development. In fact, it's been proven kids with imaginary friends and things like that have better communication skills growing up, and all sorts of different things. You engage that, you work with it. No, you tell them it's a demon and they're out there to kill us all in our sleep. It's like, God, Jesus Christ, Mom. And I love my mom, but it was just like, that's what they knew. That's how they operate. But on a very just core psychological level, that's probably quite harmful compared to other options.
Yeah. And you said that so many of us are living with the results of that. And, sometimes it's psychological, but sometimes it's even physical, because so in my family, we didn't really have medical care. We could afford it. That wasn't the problem or anything like that. It was just that my parents would pray over everything. They would cast out demons if you had a fever, all this kind of stuff, any spirit of infirmary. That was what my dad always used to say, or infirmity, right. Sorry. Yeah. And not the spirit of the infirmary. But that has still played into me being a little bit fearful of doctors and modern medicine and stuff like that. And I have to actively fight it, especially since I have a son with a genetic condition that requires a lot of medical care. But, that all plays into the choices we make now, and how honestly, like my son, when he had his stroke, he had been sick for several days. He had a stomach bug. And I think that, and I'm not going to blame myself in that way. I think that most parents at that point would have said, oh, well, he needs to go to the doctor. Like, this has been, several days he's been sick. He might be dehydrated. We don't know. But I was so just still nervous about medicine and doctors and hospitals, that I was like, oh, let's just wait it out. And I think I think part of that contributes to a lot more than we maybe see on the surface. I just think that is, and I've heard that from a lot of homeschool families, that they were denied medical care, really, like, and we had, it was never, thankfully, no one ever had anything that was so, nobody had appendicitis or anything. We had dental care and all that stuff. But, that's a really weird aspect of it. I mean, when you get into that you get that far down into this environment where you really believe that, the power of God is more important than getting your medicine. And that happened with my mother. She had cancer and she believed God was going to heal her. And she rejected a lot of medical care, and she'd probably still be here if she had done it. But she was basically trying to prove something to my brothers, who at the time were both like atheists. And she was like, she asked one of my brothers, she was like, well, if God healed me, would you believe again? And he was like, probably, Mom, and he blames himself. He's like, oh gosh, I probably, and it's like, no, that was, but all I'm saying is, that has real world repercussions. If you believe that, the spirit of God is more important than you getting, a bone marrow transplant. Yeah. It's dangerous as hell.
Yeah. Well, and it's so common. We need to wrap up soon as well. I'm aware of the time, but we can get to any of the things that people wanted to talk about. But sucks to be you guys. I had fun. But I'm just thinking of like a very prominent pastor that had serious cancer. I think it was breast cancer she had, but very seriously. And she publicly was like, she's very well known as a health pastor and things like that. She publicly was like, I'm not going to get treatment. Chemo's poison, blah, blah, blah. And she's she went off and she spent probably millions. Honestly, the places she was like, I'm in Spain doing this and I'm in Mexico doing that because it's illegal in the US. You know, and doing all these different things that probably cost a fortune. And then going, see, it was fine. And I'm like, yeah, but you spent millions. Most people don't get to do that.
No.
And how many people are going to die because they're following your example? And actually, last I heard, the whole thing had come back. It's worse than ever. And I don't know.
Is it Bill Johnson's wife?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't know. We can edit that out.
I always just try and avoid names anyway. But it's exactly. It's Benny Johnson. And she's well known for encouraging people to make bad decisions. She was well known for telling people not to wear masks and all sorts of different things. And so
I have friends I know who've lost people to COVID who are
Oh, it's a common trope.
Lose your son to COVID.
They love to put it in the news, don't they? Oh, senator who said this is now dead, or whatever, and everyone goes, and it's awful. It's awful, right? These people are totally delusional and lost in a system of belief. You know, I think of someone like Ben Johnson. I know Ben Johnson. I've made Christmas cookies in their house together with them. You know, I mean, I know these guys well. Like, I want nothing but for her to be well.
Yeah.
God, I don't care whether it's, you know, some vitamin C sun treatment in Spain or chemo. I don't care. Like I would want her to be well, but you can't avoid the fact that her being a such public figure with hundreds of thousands of people following her, millions if you know, probably her speaking about these things in this way, that's human lives are going to be lost because of that.
Yeah. You're right.
That's like, fuck, that's crazy, you know, and no one means any harm by any of it.
No,
you can't say, oh, they've got a bad intention or they're evil people. Or it's literally just lost in these systems of belief. The repercussions of believing these kind of things. No parent wants their kid to be ill, but some parents, based on those kind of beliefs, cause their children to be ill. I remember.
No, go ahead.
Go. Did you read Tara? Is it Tara Westwood, the woman that wrote? Is it Educated? It's a phenomenal book. It's a really good book. She was in a very extreme Latter-day Saints cult. But you're reading through this book and they don't believe in medicine at all on any level. And like by the end of the book, like there's a family of like, I don't know, it's like 12 siblings or whatever. And by the end of it, half of them are like in severe like issues because of different healthcare that hasn't been taken care of. That almost all of it with due care and attention, or just not letting kids do things that kids shouldn't do. You know, there's all sorts of different things that their faith basically caused so many of these people to have major issues. And you just go, guys, like, can we please?
That crosses the line. Yeah.
It's just really hard to watch.
No, and it goes back to that, the hedge of protection, removing the favor of God, because my mom, up until the end, she was talking to pastors and church leaders, like, what is it? What is the thing that I need to let go of or repent of and all this stuff?
Yes.
It's like, you're just dying of cancer. It's not because you are holding a grudge in your heart and sinning against, for God's sake, like just some things just happen, and get the care that you need when you, anyway, I could go on about that.
My mom died of cancer as well. And specifically my dad and my sister really fucked up from it because they really believed God would heal her. And, they had the best of the best. They had the Bill Johnsons and the whoever else, all these amazing healing people that are great people, again, in a whole different world and system from me now. But they genuinely have repercussions of believing so much right through to the end, even after it. These people are coming from like movements where it's like, people get raised from the dead and things like that, or they believe that, or they pray for that and stuff. And you're just like, this causes so much trauma. Like it's not healthy. No. And it's a tough one, right? Because it does become a thing of like, hey, people are free to believe what they believe. But at what point do you go, you're tiptoeing into this child abuse, you're tiptoeing into these things. And so these kind of components of like, well, I'm free to bring up my kids how I want, right? I don't have to have them educated by the state. And it's like, okay, and then it's like, and I don't have to have them medicine. It's like, okay.
We're getting into
certain points, right? And everyone's going to have a different line. It's like the Fight Club, everyone's going to have a different line on what's appropriate. But at a certain point,
if that's the right choice for you, if you have a, cathartic Fight Club.
Yeah. It's messy. It's really messy. Look, we are rapidly running out of time and I want to make sure you get back to your kids and your family. But can you tell people how to connect with you? Is Instagram kind of your main point of contact?
Yes, I'm on Instagram most, way too much. I'm Deconstruction Girl on Instagram, and you can find me on Twitter at Deconstruct Girl. Because Twitter handles are shorter. So those are the two places. If you shoot me a DM on Instagram, I can usually reply. Yeah, that's it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Honestly, I'd be amazed if most of my people are probably already following you, because like I post your stuff all the time. But yeah, I really, really love what you do. I appreciate what you do. And I think it's just, this is important work. And it's important that we have more people doing what you're doing. So yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having the time. We'll do another one, and we'll maybe actually answer some people's questions that they asked for.
Thanks so much for having me. This has been awesome. Had a great time.
If you are deconstructing, there is no reason to do this alone. It can be an incredibly lonely process, but the deconstructionnetwork.com is a free resource to help you find others deconstructing in your local area. If you would like to support what I do, everything I do is for free, from talking to people for hours on end to producing resources and podcasts. It is only possible because people give generously. There's never any need to give. It will always be free, everything I do. But if you do, we do have an amazing private community group that we talk on over on Discord that you would gain access to. And we do regular audio and video chats on there as well. So it'd be great to see you in there. But of course, never any requirement. And of course, please, please, please come and talk to me on Instagram. I love connecting with people. I love helping people on their journey. If you need a safe space to process your deconstruction, I would love to connect. It's just @PhilDrysdale. Love every one of you. Peace.